Wrestling Podcast back at you with another episode. This is Dave Vicious, along with Jess the Total Package, and Greg the British Bulldog. Nature Boy Joe and Cuz are off this week, bringing you our perspective on the world of professional wrestling. No inside sources, no ties to the industry, just stories from the diehards, sharing opinions with you. Can someone feed me today's topic? No.
David, we're adding another addition to the Greatest Feuds episode, and it's going to be arguably the biggest feud in the history of pro wrestling: Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant.
Well, weight-wise, it's pretty close, I would say. Just saying.
Okay.
Yeah. For audio fans, give us a listen on Apple, Spotify. SoundCloud,
Actually, Dave, Typhoon and Earthquake was bigger than that at a combined weight of 836 pounds.
Dave, get it right. Apple, Spotify, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, and Google Podcasts, or watch our videos on YouTube at Our Wrestling Channel. Can you do us a solid on social media and give us a follow on Instagram or Twitter at O.W.P 2019, or catch us on Facebook/Meta at Our Wrestling Podcast. Jess, why are we doing this now? I feel like we should have done this a while ago.
But I don't think that people really understand the gravity of Hogan versus Andre and how it perfectly capped. You know, we last year we reviewed WrestleMania 17, and I quoted Dave Meltzer, who said WrestleMania 17 was arguably the greatest WrestleMania of all time, and it was also a love letter to the Attitude Era because it was at the very end of the Attitude Era. I think indirectly Hogan and Andre was kind of the cap to the 80s rock and wrestling. It was the peak, and we had no idea it was the peak at the time, because we didn't know. Slowly over the next few years, wrestling would start to decline in the mainstream. But 87 was the actual peak for WWF. And it started because Hogan and Andre headlined WrestleMania 3, and it set the standard for not only WrestleMania moments, but it set the standard for what a Dome Mania should look like. And it was the first ever Dome Mania, and the only feud, I think, that could have drawn that many people was Hogan and Andre.
Yeah. There's also speculation it was, Andre was definitely going to, was supposed to just kind of sunset, right, is the deal. And Vince really cared for him a lot and wanted him to get some good paydays. And I'm sure that was part of it, but it's not the whole story. To your point, it's just, how do you not put these two guys together in these situations? And eventually, I'm sure Vince wanted to put them together eventually, but I'm sure it was also his health sped it up, right, a little bit.
What's even more impressive is that you're going to read that they fought each other so many times before in different promotions. But Andre was slammed many times.
And it did not matter. You truly believe that this was the first time that they'd ever fought. He was this is the taglines for WrestleMania 3: undefeated in 15 years, never fought before, never been slammed. None of that was true, and we fell for it hook, line, and sinker.
If people want to, was the Hogan era really that big? Yeah, it was, motherfucker. Yeah, it was. Because Vince programmed us to forget everything that they did before that. Anything that they did outside the WWF, nobody cared about. Yeah. Vince made you care about their WWF careers, and God damn it, into their feud, it was Andre was never slammed, Andre was never defeated. Yeah. Okay.
Well, Vince only cares about big guys. Do you know why? It's because these two guys that didn't work very well in the ring together made $1 billion in 2 years and set it in the stratosphere.
Andre was based,
purely on their presence.
A girdle, and I'm not trying to be, he was wearing a girdle because he had back surgery. He could barely fucking stand. And that guy versus Hulk Hogan, this limited guy that everybody shits on for his wrestling ability, they drew the most money in wrestling history. Like, it's crazy.
It is crazy. Good stuff.
Good episode. Wrap it up, Dave.
Sorry. All right, here we go.
I've said all I wanted to say.
Let's jump into the beginning. Hogan, then wrestling as Terry Boulder, wrestled Andre 5 times in the Southwest Championship Wrestling, twice in 1978.
Oh yeah, these notes are getting specific, motherfuckers. 5 times. I outlined each time.
3 times in 1979. Also on May 5th of 1979 in Dothan, Alabama, they had an arm wrestling match that ended in a no contest when Hogan overturned the table.
I'm out of here.
Such a heel move, right?
You are a baby. Stop being a baby.
We're so the Andre impressions are gonna come really.
Yeah,
quick.
It's bad. It's gonna get bad.
No baby oil. Sorry, I can't help it.
Piss break, boss. Piss break.
Don't do that. Their first WWF encounters came in the spring of 1980 when Andre competed as a face and Hogan was actually a heel. The two met 16 times throughout the year, with Andre victorious in most of their matches. Several matches, however, ended with both wrestlers being counted out. At Shea Stadium during Showtime at Shea, as well as a month later in Hamburg, Pennsylvania, Hogan body slammed Andre, but ended up losing by pinfall.
I want to say, off the top of my head, the Shea Stadium one didn't Zbyszko and Bruno headline that in a cage? I want to say that was the same card. That was a really big. The Shea Stadium show was a big show, and it's always been noted that Hogan slammed Andre. I think the match ended by DQ or some bullshit. And he fucking slammed him. So it's hilarious in that promotion. Years later, Vince is like, he never happened. He's never been slammed. And it's like, what are you talking about? Like,
prove me wrong. I own all the video.
Prove me wrong.
Yeah. Prove me wrong. Did you
show me footage? It was on videotape. I don't care.
No, it's funny that you say that because like we're in an age now where we can just go and look it up right now and prove someone right or wrong. Back here, they didn't even have VHSs that much back here. It was all like you either saw it live or you read about it in your local newspaper or whatever, and that was it.
But we need the kids to know that it wasn't about Rock and Austin.
Uphill and
it was about Hogan and Andre, and that's actually this is the apex of feuds and wrestling, and you cannot, unless you were there and living in this time, you cannot understand. And we're trying to teach how important this was to the business.
It changed the whole business forever. I mean,
1000%.
Absolutely.
Sorry, let's go back to 1979, Dave.
No, actually, we're going to go through 1982 and 83.
Oh, my bad.
While both were working in New Japan Pro Wrestling, the two had several additional matches. However, during these matches, Andre was the heel and Hogan was the face. So you're starting to get that little taste test here. The two would be in AWA at the same time between 1981 and 83, and they would tag against Bobby Heenan and his stable of heels. When you say Bobby Heenan, they're not actually wrestling the Weasel, right? They're just wrestling
sometimes they would. He would jump in sometimes. If not, sometimes he would put his stable in there. It would be a handicap. It would be Heenan's two guys and then Heenan.
And him.
And then like they would try to get him and fucking Weasel out, or it would be regular.
You gotta love Heenan for that, bro. He'd actually jump in with those guys.
Boot in the face. And now Andre the Giant picks up the Hulk and puts him over Duncan. Malini down, counting 1, 2, and 3. It's all over. Hulk Hogan and I have defeated the combination of Buckwinkel, Big Bad Bobby Duncan, Ken Patera, and Bobby the Brain Heenan. The pinfall goes to Andre the Giant and the incredible Hulk Hogan.
And we've talked about it in past episodes too. Vince purged the shit out of the AWA. Took everybody. Took Ventura, Gene Okerlund, Andre, Hogan. Like it was just a clean sweep.
And left Greg Gagne and
Hollywood,
John Tatum, and Nick Buckwinkel.
Dick the Bruiser. I know Dick the Bruiser was important back in the day, but he was not. If you didn't get bought up by Vince, you had to look at yourself in the mirror and be like, why didn't he call me? Well, let me tell you why. He doesn't want you.
Nick Bockwinkel's like, did he call? Did he call? Oh, he didn't call? Oh, he didn't call? Is it because I'm 50? Is it because I'm 50? It's because I'm 50, isn't it?
It's because I'm not nationally appealing. Okay, that's fine.
Again, flashback. I'm not booked, Terry. I'm not booked.
I'll stay with Vern. It's fine. Everything's gonna be fine.
No, this will be good. We're gonna do our shows from a Showboat Casino in Vegas, and ESPN's picking us up. We've got it made. The sky is the limit for the American Wrestling Association.
Oh no. All right. The friendship continued into 1984 when Hogan returned to the WWF. On the night that Hogan won the WWF World Heavyweight Championship from the Iron Sheik, Andre was among the wrestlers who congratulated Hogan during a post-match celebration. What did that sound like?
I pour beer on you, champagne.
Did he pour champagne on his head and Hogan got it in his eyes, and you could tell Hogan.
Oh, you can tell he's burning.
You can tell his eyes were burning.
Andre the Giant congratulating the new heavyweight world.
That's nice of you. I'm really proud of you, and you are a good wrestler.
Oh, you told me not to do that, didn't you?
I bet he did, and he did it anyway.
I knew that if you poured champagne in your eyes.
Are you going to tell Andre what not to do? I don't think so.
You better cut the promo.
Yeah. Get out of here. Play
you
cards.
won the tag team championship.
I'll talk about that later.
Oh, here we go.
Oh, why?
Heenan joined the WWF in 1984 and again targeted Hogan and Andre. During the next 2 years, Andre and Hulk Hogan teamed against several Heenan family pairings, most notably Stud and King Kong Bundy, with Heenan joining them on occasion. You'd said sometimes that 3-on-2 handicap, right, Jess? As was the case in the AWA, the Hogan Andre team almost always came out the winners. That's got to be fun, though, you know. And isn't there some heat between Stud and Andre here too? I'm trying to remember. Did he kind of bully him
Andre
out?
never liked other big guys, so he got kind of threatened like by them. So he would basically torture the other giants. And the rumor has it is when Stud left,
drove him out
in like 86, 87, he was just like, "Yeah, I'm done." Like it was after a rough match with Andre. Stud's like, "I'm just fucking out of here. I'm done." Like and just walked away. And the rumor has it is Stud literally just walked out of the arena and never came back and just told Vince, "Yeah, I'm done." Like.
Which, even when you're the most popular wrestler in the world, the biggest by far, you have a disease that makes you the biggest. He was still, and you're still petrified to lose your spot, and you will take it out on anyone that's over 6'5" and 350 pounds. Like he had
he had a problem with Hogan because Hogan said at first, you know, we're just talking storyline stuff. These notes really are based off, but in real life, actually, they had a rough road. You know, Hogan is a big guy. He was 6'8", like 300 pounds at a time. And Andre hated that. Even though Andre was taller and bigger,
I think at one
Hogan
point,
was a
right?
massive motherfucker. And so, Andre would torture him. And Hogan would say there was a lot of times where, again, I know Hogan sometimes likes to embellish. But Hogan in his book especially said there was a lot of times where before he fought Andre, he'd vomit in a trash can right before because he was so fucking nervous. Like, because he's like, I didn't know what he was going to do to me. Like, I didn't know if he was going to choke the shit out of me. Like, he would choke me at times where I would almost fall unconscious and he would be laughing in the ring. And then he would let him go right before he lost consciousness. Like, ha, ha, ha. Like, just because you almost killed him. Like,
I'm just playing, boss.
I was fucking around. I saw your eyes.
You'll see the stars.
Yeah, I saw you. You peed your pants a little.
But those stories with Andre, just like the drinking stories, they're notorious. Like you didn't know what you were. There
was another time where Hogan said he was trying to make peace with Andre, so he bought him a case of wine, which is 12 bottles, and so it's like a big case of wine. And it's 12 bottles of wine, and so they were doing a bus ride, and I don't remember if he said it was a Japan tour or just a general tour. They all took a tour bus, and it would go from town to town. So he's sitting there with Andre, and he gave him, and he's like, "Oh, thanks, boss." And then he just said, like, Hogan, as the trip going on, an empty bottle would go whizzing towards the front. Andre was just throwing empty bottles, like whizzing by Hogan's head.
Oh my!
And then, like, you just see Hogan's like, "Fuck, that's 1, 2." And he said, before we got to the next stop, all of them were empty. He drank all 12 bottles of wine, and he's like, "Piss break, boss! Piss break!" Like from the back of the bus, yelling at the driver to stop over so he could piss. And like Andre just drank that much, and so finally, after a while, especially when Vince started putting all the stock in Hogan and Hogan started making millions, Vince pretty much said, "You got to protect him. Like, you have to help me protect Hogan. He's the guy that's going to be our golden goose. He's the guy that's going to make a lot of money. So I need you to protect him." And without Andre being in the locker room, like, I think a lot of people would have tried to not believe in his shit. And so Vince might have gotten overthrown or people would have left or whatever. But Andre was one of the first 4 guys that in the back that would just tell people, you know what? No, like, he's right. Like, let him do this vision. He's going to push it forward. Get behind Hogan. You need to get behind Hogan. Like, he's the guy, whether you like it or not. It's not you. And so, like, a lot of these guys were, they all have egos. Andre included, the Pipers, the Orndorffs, all those guys, like, "Oh man, I'm just as big, man." Like, they're all remembering their territory days where they might have sold out Portland, or they might have sold out San Francisco, or they might have sold out Florida. Sure. But Vince is like, no, we're talking national level here. Like, Hogan's like a big fucking deal. And you have to bow to him. You have to allow me to push him as a megastar. It's only going to make you more money. And Andre was one of those guys in the back that's like, no, do what he says. Like, and Andre made sure there was order in the locker room. He was like the original Undertaker. He was a bully, I think, Andre, to a certain extent, but he was also doing it again because Senior pulled him aside years before and said, "Look, take care of him. Don't let my son fucking get eaten up by these guys."
Once McMahon put that wall down, because that's one person that Andre's never going to cross is VKM. He wasn't going to do that.
So Andre beat the shit. Andre kind of inadvertently beat the shit out of him in the AWA days and all that stuff. And then when they got to WWF and Vince put the rocket to him, Andre was then, he's like, "All right, we're cool." Yeah, he's like, we're cool now. And even there's even pictures out there when Hogan married Linda, Andre was his best man, and Andre has a tuxedo on and he's smiling with the two. So Andre
When
was at
Vince married
Hogan's
Linda,
wedding.
or sorry, oh, I'm
No,
sorry,
when Hogan married his wife Linda.
his wife Linda.
Yeah, so Andre was in Hogan's wedding, and Andre was Hogan's best man. Like, so it's just kind of they became really close, and it's because Andre knew, like, all right, like this guy is making a lot of money, and like it doesn't
He's making
matter
all of
if
us a
he's
lot of money.
well,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter if he's a Lou Thez or a Ric Flair or a Harley Race. He's fucking our guy. Like, and we're
He's on
crossing
top of the
national
card.
boundaries. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're setting ratings like on syndication. People are watching our syndicated television there. We're selling arenas out. Like this
Because
guy
of Hogan.
is
Yeah.
doing and he's doing it on a national level. And Vince is kicking down doors of territories, going to Texas, going to the Carolinas, going everywhere. Whether he
Yeah.
succeeded or not, he might have had a half full house, but he's kicking the door down with Hogan. And Andre was a big part of that behind the scenes. A lot of people don't know that. They just kind of see him as like this villain. Most people don't even remember him as a face. Andre was fucking nimble, jumping off the top rope. Andre was awesome, like when he was young. But as he got older and he didn't eat healthy, he drank a lot. So the disease started really taking hold. He started gaining a lot of weight annually.
Could you imagine an Andre the Giant wine shit after 6 cases of
no.
wine?
Oh my God,
wine,
yeah.
6 bottles of wine, or you had 12 bottles? Imagine the wine.
That was
shits.
another story. Hogan said they'd be in Japan and the bathrooms were like cut in one mold. And so like it's just when they constructed these hotels, like they would just do one little mold of the bathtub, the toilet, you know, and they put it in and then glue it in or whatever, and then just put the plumbing. You know, the plumbing was already in. So it was way too small for Andre. So Andre would either shit in the bathtub or Hogan say he would call him laughing, going, "Oh, come here, boss, come up here." And Hogan said he spread newspaper out one time on his bed when he checked out, and he shit all the way on this like king size bed, and he was like, it was the whole length of the bed.
Oh my
and
God.
he's just like, and Andre was laughing. So Andre was just fucking laughing his ass off. And Hogan's like, the smell was so bad. And Andre was just laughing his ass off. Like, like just laughing. It's just amazing.
Yeah.
Like they did have a relationship. I know Hogan embellishes a lot of stuff, but a lot of people have said, yeah, they did have that relationship. So
That's
when
a lot of stuff's confirmed too. So, you know,
yeah, when they got to Vince, you know, Vince was, Andre was like, all right, Hogan's my guy. So I'm protecting him. Like, and so it's
but
only
anybody else out there, watch out, because if he didn't like you that night, he was stepping on your hair and ripping it out.
Yeah, he was pissed off, and Hogan respected him or whatever. And leading up to, you know, the stuff that we get in the feud here, where Andre turns heel and he had to go away. Dave left off right here. I'll get back on track for us.
Sure.
Andre, his back was bad because he was gaining weight rapidly. Every year he was putting on X amount of pounds, and his body was just starting to fall apart on him because he had that growing disease. They didn't really have effective treatments. When it was offered to him, Andre declined it because he was afraid that it would make him smaller or it would make him less strong, and then he couldn't have the giant, you know, persona.
Yeah.
So Andre just really decided to drink himself to death in a weird way because he was like, I don't want treatment because if it backfires, I lose my, like, you know, my livelihood. And Andre just wanted to keep going.
Drinking covered the pain for sure. So
yeah,
1,000%. Anyone that's ever traveled for work, what a pain in the ass it is, and how much it just hurts. So imagine that where you don't fit into seats and cabs and restaurants, and everyone's staring at you like you're a monster of some kind. He was in pain every day of his life, 24/7.
He had to buy 2 seats. He had to buy 2 seats whenever he flew
all the time,
so he could sit in the middle. Yeah, and
So
Andre. He was just uncomfortable all the time. So he was always medicating himself and everything. And like, he was just going that way. And like, he had to go in for back surgery. And in 86, I want to say towards the end of 86 is when he went away. And they didn't even know a story that they told on his documentary. The doctors didn't even know how much didn't know how much anesthesia to give him because they didn't want to give him too much because it would kill him. But they also knew that he's a giant. And so they're going to have to give him 2. Is it 2 times, 3 times, 4 times? I don't know. How much do you give this guy to keep him out? They did not want this fucking giant waking up with his back fucking flayed open on an operating table because that would have been bad.
And they asked him like, how much do you drink to like relax at night or whatever? And I forget what the answer was, but it was like, holy shit. That's what they had to go by. So what does it take to get a giant loose?
Gas to put him under, to put a giant to sleep and then be able to operate on his back.
I don't know. 5 bottle bourbon.
Maybe. So that's
before dinner, and then after I do more.
So after that leave of absence, Andre did return to the WWF. The company began advertising Andre once again as a face. He would usually be an opponent of either Randy Macho Man Savage or as a tag team partner of Hogan to face Savage and the Honky Tonk Man. However, Rick Steamboat competed instead in Andre's place with no official explanation given for his absence at those times.
I didn't even know as a fan. So this hits me in all the feels because I started watching wrestling like December of '87.
Sure.
So this WrestleMania 3 had already happened, but
Mhm.
I got to rent videos and rent WrestleMania 3 and all the stuff in '87 and then learn about this feud. I didn't know until doing research, like, and I think I probably read this like years ago. I only knew what I was watching when I was 10 years old. And like just all the buildup that they showed you. But they were doing it on subtle house shows, like here. Andre just not showing up. No reason. And then Hogan would have Steamboat step in, they'd win, and blah, blah, blah. And then after a while, the announcer started saying, like, I wonder where Andre is. And they started it here. And it's amazing how much they started. They put that much thought into turning him heel because Vince loved him so much. And Vince is like, I don't want to fucking rush this. If we're going to turn this monster heel, let's do it gradually. Because Andre loved the people. He loved people. Andre loved the fans. He legitimately was a good guy when it came to that. He loved talking with children. He loved hanging out with like the adults and talking about like wrestling and stuff like that. Like Andre loved his fans legitly. And so to turn him heel, Vince had to explain to him like, you're declining fast. And that's hard for someone to hear. Even though Andre knew he was probably on that road, Vince is like, it's time. And you're not going to be the same after the surgery because we don't even know if it's going to work. So like, we got to find a way to make you bad. And he came to Andre early and just said, I want you to think about losing to Hogan. And that was an early thing. At the end of '86, I read somewhere, it might have been in Andre's autobiography, not written by him, obviously, but somebody else. And that Vince came to him like after the back surgery in '86 and just said, I need you to lose to Hogan. I need that from you. And he
let's take this is one example right here, right? So Andre made an appearance on a televised show.
Yeah, so like they started the seed with Andre coming out being overly corny with the crowd, like, hello, hi. Like, and then he would just kind of be like, he would get a scowl on his face and he would just turn around and walk out without any explanation. Yeah. And they did it on many house shows. Like,
this is where you start to see a slight ramp up. So at Madison Square Garden, we have a televised show. He gets into the ring after Hogan had won a match there. He simply picks up the WWF World Heavyweight Championship belt. He looked at it and just gave it back to a bewildered looking Hogan before leaving ringside. I think Hogan sells that just as much, if not more, than Andre does. Like, what are you doing here? Why are you looking at my belt? And why are you just giving it back to me? You're not talking to me. You're just walking away. Like, that's fucking weird. And Hogan's like, you remember Hogan's bewildered face? It's like,
Maniacs, what's going on?
And he would turn to the crowd like, what? Yeah, it's classic.
Did he give me power? I don't know.
Announcers Gorilla Monsoon and Gene Okerlund thought it was a weird, strange appearance from Andre, but they didn't think anything more of it. Then things really start heating up on an edition of Piper's Pit in 1987.
I'm warning you now, Dave. Craig and I are going to go off the rails.
This is going to be fun.
This is bad.
Yeah, you might have to edit some. Hogan was presented a trophy for being the WWF World Heavyweight Champion for 3 years running. Andre came out to congratulate him, but later Hogan remarked how Andre's handshake felt just a little too firm. Well, you are shaking the hand of a giant.
Ladies and gentlemen, Hulk Hogan's best friend, Andre the Giant. I'm sure you are coming up for congratulations, and I'm sure you have something to say.
3 years to be a champion. It's a long time.
It's a long time, yeah. Well, nice trophy here. There you go, Hogan.
Okay.
So I remember like this again. This is my fandom here, and like I remember 3 years to be a champion. It's a long time. And
going to end soon. What?
Playing into WrestleMania 3, it was all those snippets, of like the Piper's Pit leading up to it. And then he just like he patted Hogan hard on the shoulder and then shook his hand or whatever. And Hogan's like, whoa, that's pretty tight. He didn't say that, but like, yeah, the look on his face.
Brother,
why are you gripping so hard, brother? And then like Andre would just walk off and leave. And like that was the buildup. I never forget those sound clips. They're embedded in my head.
I bet Andre
And
really
just
did shake his
watched
hand a
him
little too
over and
hard
over
too.
again. I get excited now talking about him.
Just sweaty shirt, just pit stains like for
Andre
days.
just sweating like a hog, like just it's
God.
on fire.
It's hot.
3 years to be a champion. Yeah,
Long time.
So hot.
On the following week of Piper's Pit, Andre was presented a slightly smaller trophy for participation. I'm just kidding. The only undefeated wrestler in wrestling history.
That's basically what it was.
Vince and the WWF had billed him as being undefeated for 15 years, despite that really not being true and losing several matches via countout and disqualification. Prove it. Prove it.
Prove it back in 1987, you liar.
Hogan came out to congratulate Andre, but spoke mostly of himself because he's Hulk Hogan, causing Andre to walk out of the midst of Hogan's speech. A meeting between Andre and Hogan was scheduled to take place on the next week of Piper's Pit, February 7th of 1987.
I remember all these sound clips. My God, like it just my childhood.
You're going to play a bunch here. And Piper's just breaking this in. Here's my question. If Piper does an edition of Piper's Pit, does he get paid for a night of like what wrestling would normally be?
Yeah, man.
Yeah. hey,
I fucking
hey, Rowdy, what did you get paid? What did you get paid for that when you?
Probably a couple bucks, man. Vince was always pretty good with me. When I went a couple beers, man.
He tried to tell me, man, that Piper's Pit was paid a little bit differently than wrestling, man. But I was like, no, I'm not gonna pay it.
Oh, I couldn't help it. I had to open that can up.
So yeah, so I mean, and then yes. So basically, they did the contrast. Hogan gets a trophy for being 3 years champion, right? It's a big.
And then Andre gets like this trophy.
And then the next week Andre has a smaller trophy. Ventura even notes like that trophy small.
That's perfect.
McMahon, why is that trophy so much? Why I'm smaller? And so like there was a whole. It's a whole
Vince
thing.
is selling the crap out of it.
And then Hogan and Andre comes out and he looks at the trophy and he almost looks at it like in disgust. And then Hogan comes out and he's like, "Wow, brother, to be undefeated, I've got everybody give it up for." And Andre just walks out on him and doesn't even say anything. He's like, "Oh, give it up for Andre." Like it's an awkward clap. It's just everything is like
awesome.
And then on Ventura and they had a segment with Ventura and Piper, and then Piper's like, "You're trying to stir the bee's nest up, man. Nothing's wrong." Oh, wham! I'll tell you, Piper. Something's going on, Piper. And then they did a whole thing, and then Piper's like, "Well, you want to find it out?" And he's like, "We could do that, or we could do something else, Piper. I will produce Andre the Giant right here next week. Can you produce?"
You do that, man. You'll do that next week.
And he goes, "You damn betcha, man. You got." And it's a whole. It's amazing. Like I can't. It's great. It's all fucking great. Like it's all great. And the next week, Dave.
When Andre came out next week, he was accompanied by Bobby the Brain Heenan. Heenan then accused Hogan of being Andre's friend only so he would not have to defend the WWF World Heavyweight Championship against him. Hogan had disputed this, but Andre challenged Hogan to a match for the WWF World Heavyweight Championship at WrestleMania 3. Heenan, following Hogan's apparent disbelief, stated, "You can't believe it. Maybe you'll believe this, Hogan." Followed by Andre ripping off Hogan's shirt and crucifix, with the crucifix causing Hogan's chest to actually bleed. This is etched in my memory. I totally remember this whole session.
And it was actually Andre's nail. In Hogan's book, Andre had a long thumbnail. So when he grabbed Hogan's shirt to rip it, he caught the cross at the same time and ripped it, and Andre's thumb scraped Hogan's chest. So Hogan was actually bleeding. And then, of course, Piper, like in all of his books, I took credit, I improv, and I said, "You're bleeding." And then, I give Piper credit. I'm sure they did, because there was no script back here, legit.
No, they worked it out.
Yeah.
Real time.
This segment is, if people don't understand, if it doesn't give you goosebumps now, you're ridiculous. Like
people flipped out. People flipped
to
out.
To finally hear Andre talk after Heenan did his shit and Hogan looked at him, he's like, this can't be happening, Andre. Please tell me this is not happening. And Andre just looked at him and he was like, "I'm here for one reason, to challenge you for a world championship match at WrestleMania." And like the whole place popped. And like Hogan looked at him, he's like, "Well, we're friends, brother." And it was ridiculous acting by Hogan. I'm not going to say it wasn't.
But
like,
it still worked.
To see Andre so stoic, and Andre was just staring at him like blank. And then Heenan's course, this guy that Hogan and Andre had been fighting against for years. Yeah. Like Andre walks out with him. Like it's crazy. Like it was all. This was like holy shit.
That was enough in itself.
It was visual perfection because even the way that Andre kind of almost ragdolls Hulk, like when he's ripping his shirt, like it doesn't go kind of right away, but it's like the way he kind of has his way with him, the way Hogan moves back and forth, and then the way the shirt rips, and the visual of the blood, and then of course is like the crucifix and
Hogan falls down to his knee. He falls
picking up the cross
after Andre walks off. He falls down to his knee. And Piper was silent for a second. He was putting his arms out like he didn't know if he wanted to console Hogan. And then
is that your cross, man? Your cross fall off your chest, man? What happened, man? Get up, man! Wow, that's crazy, wasn't it, man? Like he could have totally ruined it. Like anyway, see you next week, everybody.
You're bleeding. You're bleeding.
And yeah, Hogan, like he was down on his knees and like he picked up his shirt and his cross and was just looking at it. He's like, like and it just kind of like came up. And it was perfect. It really was perfect. I know we're making jokes about it, but it was like perfect.
Got one more thing to say to you, Hogan.
Look at me when I'm talking to you. I'm there to challenge you for a world championship match in the WrestleMania.
Andre, please, no, it's not happening.
We're friends, Andre, please.
You can't believe it? Maybe you'll believe this, Hogan.
What are you doing, man? You can't leave like this. What are you doing, Andre? You can't.
Of the signing, right? Well, wasn't there also the signing or no?
Even after that, like the week after, Piper brings Hogan back out. Hogan doesn't have a shirt on, has a Band-Aid on his chest with his belt on, and he's holding his broken crucifix in his hand. And Piper's like, I just want to know, are you not going to fight him at WrestleMania 3 for the World Heavyweight Championship? Tell me yes or no. And Hogan's all, yes, like in the crowd fucking explodes. Like it's all ridiculous 80s, but it was so beautifully done.
So
and
was
then,
the actual signing, was that just taped and played later before WrestleMania as well? Because I know they sat in a room, right?
They had like an actual they had a press conference of all like the
that's
media
right,
and
that too.
Like before, and then they had the signing, and then they had like an actual press conference. They did WrestleMania 3 like
isn't this the one where he's like, just sign it, and Hogan's like,
yes,
and Andre's just stoic. And Hogan's ready to blow a gasket.
He's all, just sign it if you're going to sign it.
Not like this man. Another thing. I just want you to get one thing straight, Hogan. 15 years this man's gone undefeated. The 3 years you've been world champion. You behind his back. You've laughed at him. You never once gave this man an opportunity. Now he's got that opportunity.
Sign it if you're going to sign it.
Yeah.
Andre signed it, but Andre started speaking in another great moment. Andre starts speaking to him in French. He's like, "Le chef of all." He's like, "You speak to me in English when you speak to me. You are like a brother." Like, and it was all like ridiculous. Like, but it was all like
so funny.
If you were in the 80s and you were watching this shit, you're like, "Holy shit!" Like, this is getting really real right now. Like,
it did look really tense when you're a kid watching Hogan like ready to blow up in that room on signing.
And so where was this on? Was Superstars not on? So was this Tuesday Night Titans or prime time? When would you see this?
Superstars was still
okay. So it was
still on. So
Saturday mornings.
I think they aired the signing on like the syndicated television.
You're seeing
they might
it
have done it on prime
mornings
time.
for
They might have
sure.
done it on prime time. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Because primetime wrestling was a thing back here. And now we're going to get to the big ass main event.
At WrestleMania 3, Andre was billed at 520 pounds, and the stress of such immense weight on his bones and joints resulted in constant pain, causing him to actually wear a brace underneath that wrestling singlet. If you see Andre from years prior, he never wore a singlet. He actually just wore trunks, right? But the singlet is there to basically hide the brace and the also the what do we call it, like a girdle almost, but it definitely was a brace because of the surgery. Hogan won the match after body slamming Andre, later dubbed the body slam heard round the world, all my ligaments, brother. Even though he'd slammed him several times before, but followed by Hogan's running leg drop finisher. This was billed as the first time Hogan ever slammed him, but he had done it multiple times in 1980, and his ligaments were fine. Andre also had been slammed previously, by the way, by Harley Race. Was it El Sinic, or am I saying that right?
I have no idea.
Okay, and Stan Hansen. Stan Hansen body slam Andre. I'm sure Andre had to jump for that one.
And again, like, WrestleMania, that body slam is so legendary, and that moment's been played over and over again. But if you go back and again, of course, all the critics gave the match like an F because Andre could barely fucking walk. And like Hogan wasn't like a wrestling wizard as far as that was concerned anyway. But if you don't go back and watch WrestleMania 3 and appreciate, again, the tone of the way Andre was and all the vignettes leading up to where he was silent and stoic, and just go back and watch Andre with no music being carted out in that cart to the ring and all that trash hitting him is like a memory I'll never forget. And this was a guy that was loved and everything, and they did such a great job.
They turned on him in like 6 months.
He's an actual giant. Like he's scary if he wants to be, and like and just the way he walked down, and Bob Uecker was special guest announcer, and the way he was announcing Andre, just so like, and weighing 520 pounds, Andre the Giant, and all the flashbulbs go off in that fucking arena. Because yes, folks, back then there was cameras with flashbulbs, not a cell phone.
All right.
And like all the trash was bouncing off Andre's head, chest. Like, it's amazing to watch, like all that.
Thank goodness nobody bought batteries yet. Yeah.
By the way, back here at WrestleMania 3, there was no fireworks, there was no pyro, nothing.
No, nothing like that.
They just came out from a WWF symbol out from a curtain, and
sure.
And Hogan, Andre was on the cart. They had the cart back here, but Hogan walked, and like it was just crazy to watch that. And then when they faced off, like it was just kind of insane. Hogan didn't do his normal thing where he points you and does all that and gets in the ring and he celebrates. He looked scared, and he got in the corner and he tore his shirt, like almost privately, like he tore his shirt, and he's staring at Andre, and he didn't make a big deal out of it. Like
he had a very stoic, sobering.
Yeah, he tore it like really like in his own bubble, and then stared at Andre, and then they did that iconic stare down that I have in my back.
Yeah.
This is from WrestleMania 3, and they just stared at each other for a while, and like the flashbulbs were insane. Like, and just Andre,
You know what I hate, Jess, is Hogan's hyperbole of the whole thing. It's not necessary. Like all the stuff about he didn't know he was going over.
Facts, yeah.
He didn't know he was going over till they went out there or whatever. He didn't know what the deal was. And like he ripped all the muscles in his back. Like
blah, blah.
None of that was necessary because the event was big enough in its honesty and just the two guys. And the more stories where it gets convoluted, it's like what's true or like what's not. And Hogan just like stretch the truth about almost every aspect of
just
WrestleMania.
Just go back
3.
and watch it, and it's.
And we didn't even talk about it. 93,173 people.
Yeah.
And I know that there's controversy about only 70,000 paid, and they papered the rest. Whatever.
Sure.
93,000 people were in that building in 1987 to watch WrestleMania 3, Hogan versus Andre.
No internet to sell the tickets. No, everything's by phone.
No Titantron. You had 4 like hanging screens, which you still couldn't see like until it got dark.
Those guys. And as the match got going, the match was fine for what it was. Some people like Meltzer gives it like like a 1 star, and I'm like, what did you?
Who cares?
This is the best. This is the best match they had, and I think it was properly choreographed. And Patterson probably did
the show, sure, and nobody knew they were gonna do it. But at the same time, like everybody came to watch Hogan versus Andre, and the stare down alone. Go back and watch this stare down. It's legendary, and
the crowd is just clamoring.
All the people that bought tickets in the crowd were like, "I just got all my money's worth right now." Watching them stare each other down, not even touching each other yet, and then they get into it, and it's a fine match for what it was. And then Hogan slams him and drops the leg, and that place is insane. Like
the almost 3 count in the first like 30 seconds of when they
did
locked
this
up.
Amazing. They booked it well. They thought
Hogan went for the slam, and Andre just waited him and fell on him and almost pinned him.
Yeah,
right?
fell on him, and then Joey Morrell almost
the air came out of the building.
Made it look like he made it look like he hit 3, but he didn't. Like it was a whole thing, and they played. We're going to talk more. We're fucking 47 minutes in, and we haven't even gotten to the meat of their feud, which is amazing because this count fuels it. That false count that we just talked about fuels this for the rest of the year that they feud.
Look at the look of disdain on the face of Andre. What's Hogan saying to him, I wonder? What could Hogan possibly be saying to him? Certainly like to be able to read lips at this. He's hulking up right now. Shoved by Andre, and the champion retaliates. Oh, big right hand blocked by the champion. And the Hulkster unloading, going for a slam. Oh, he collapsed. 1, 2. 2 count only. Was that 2 or was that 3? 2 count only. Ooh, that was close, Gorilla. Shoulder. Oh,
So basically that's what happens. They stare off. Hogan blocks a right hand. He starts punching Andre. He goes for the slam right away. 30 seconds into the match, Andre falls on him. It looks like he pins him. He doesn't. And then they continue. They continue the match going on after that, and then Hogan will end up slamming him.
What's the time on the match, Jess? How long did it go?
I don't remember. It's probably only like 8 to 10 minutes.
It's not that long.
Yeah, it's not that long.
Correctly.
He wasn't.
Yeah.
Andre wasn't in good shape. Like he
was not, and they hit it very well. Let me see here. Hogan Andre, 12 minutes, 1 second.
But 3 minutes of that is stare down.
3 minutes of that stare down, 3 minutes is a bear hug, 3 minutes is, you know what I mean? Like
I do believe the story that Hogan said when Andre told him, "Don't take me outside," and then he took him outside.
Yeah, so he took him outside, and Andre got pissed. That's where that shitty headbutt where he headbutts the pole, and Andre makes it look so fake because he didn't plan on being out there. So he put Hogan's head up against the pole to headbutt him, and Hogan ducks, and Andre literally like puts his hands like this and misses it by like a foot. And like even the announcers were like, keep going.
I don't think
let's go. Yeah.
But good stuff. Great event.
Yes. And this started it off. And so it set the record, 93,000 people. The pay-per-view buy rate, of course, was a major success. WrestleMania 3 hit a bigger home run than the first WrestleMania did. This one, like, set the standard where they put it in a fucking football stadium, and like wrestling couldn't draw. Oh my God. Like, this was covered on all the mainstream media, all the sports centers. And I know the sports center wasn't around back then, but you know, whatever the equivalent to that was back then, they played clips of WrestleMania 3 for weeks about how a wrestling company can draw 90,000 people, Hogan and Andre, and Hogan slams him and Hogan beats him. This is the peak of Hulkamania.
It puts him on the main event for sure. The main event standard of.
And they're going to go on. Vince is going to use them. You're going to read on later to announce another pay-per-view.
Here we go. In the inaugural Survivor Series event, Andre and Hogan were named as captains of their respective teams. After earlier confrontations with each other in the rings early in the match, the two finally met midway through the match, battling for approximately 1 minute with Hogan dominating Andre. However, just as Hogan was about to knock Andre from the ring, heel wrestlers like King Kong Bundy and One Man Gang would interfere from the outside of the ring and cause Hogan to be counted out.
Ball next to this guy. He ducked underneath and makes a tag. Here we go. Here we go. It's Andre and the Hulkster face to face, toe to toe. He tried for the headbutt, but the champ blocked it. Big chop. Champ answers with another chop. They're slugging it out. I can't believe Hogan is getting the better of it. Andre rammed into the turnbuckle. And now he's over to Hulk's corner. Andre's in trouble. Hulk's cleaning up everybody.
Andre went on to be the sole survivor of the match, pinning Bam Bam Bigelow. After the match, Hogan returned to the ring and attacked Andre, knocking him out of the ring. As we continue on Saturday night's main event, 14.
Oh, 14. Sorry, you're right. Fuck, you got me.
Which aired on January 2nd of 1988. It was actually taped on December 7th of 87. Andre had snuck up to get revenge on Hogan, choking him from behind until he was virtually unconscious, not letting go after 7 face-line wrestlers came out to try to pull Andre away. Then we get to the main event on
I'm going to put
5th.
that clip in right now, too. That's legendary. That was when I first started to become a wrestling fan.
You're like, whoa, what's going on here?
One of the very first superstars of wrestling I watched, I said it was Sam Houston versus Terry Gibb, and that match ended. And then Vince goes, let's go back to this past week on Saturday night's main event and see what happened with Hogan's rematch and King Kong Bundy. And they showed the footage of Andre choking him. And basically, because for the whole time, even during the Survivor Series time, Andre didn't re-challenge him yet for the title. Him and Bobby Heenan campaigned about how it was bullshit. He pinned him. Andre fell on Hogan. The referee counted 3. He was just in Hogan's back pocket. He didn't want to count 3, blah, blah, blah. It was a whole thing. So you're like, oh my God, a rematch is going to happen. Rematch wasn't really Survivor Series because they didn't really touch each other to the end. But everybody knew Andre was very quiet about his rematch. And then finally, Andre was in Bundy's corner here. He gets in here and he chokes the shit out of him. After Hogan wins, Andre looks like he's going to walk away. Ventura's like, you know why? Money. Andre's not getting paid. He's not going to get in there. And the second Ventura said that, Hogan turns his back to pose to the other side. And Andre fucking gets back in and chokes the shit out of him and starts, throttling him, and doing it. All the faces, the Bulldogs, Hacksaw, Jake, Roberts,
they can't pull him
all
off,
of them run out. They can't get him off. Finally, Hacksaw hits Andre with a 2x4. It breaks over Andre's back, and Andre looks at him. And even Ventura's like, he's looking at him. It was amazing. It was all just done. And then Hacksaw cowers out and runs away or whatever. And then Andre looks down at Hogan or whatever and throws the belt on him. and like Hogan's like,
Well, I hope that
slobbering all
2x4
over
was
himself.
gimmicked. That's
Of course. Yeah, but it was. Like,
I don't know, but I'll keep looking for him.
I'll keep looking for the 2x4 like gimmicking.
hit him as hard as I could. He stared at me, and I'm like, "Oh, I gotta go."
And that
This is
leads
not
us
working out.
into the main event on February 5th of 1988. Andre would
Gotta
win the
run.
match and the WWF World Heavyweight Championship
Look at the
from Hogan.
time.
Even though Hogan's
Well,
shoulders
my
were not
job
on
is
the
done,
match,
tough guy.
during the entire 3 count, the referee was distracted by Virgil during Hogan's pinfall, an attempt of Andre immediately before he was set up to finish there. Immediately after winning, while still inside the ring and interviewed by Gene Okerlund, Andre publicly contractually surrendered the title to DiBiase. You can see the title behind me. That was the only time Andre ever wore it on his shoulder because he immediately
God, and it was
turned
only
over.
on for like
And he
10
was legally-
seconds.
he
It was so
legally a
sad.
He was a WWF champion for 60 seconds, but Andre was still noticed in the record books. He's a former World Wrestling Federation champion.
Exactly.
But maybe Lady Luck riding on his shoulders here tonight. One headbutt. A second headbutt. Andre spins a Hulkster around. Suplex right on top of him. He's on him. One. We get a 2. That's it. He got him. He got him. He got him. No, he didn't. The referee counted 3. We've got a new world champion. No, we don't either. I told it, McMahon. I told you. I told the world that the Giant would win it.
But the transaction was subsequently declared invalid by the then WWF president Jack
Look how
Tunney.
small it looks on his shoulder.
Yeah,
behind
it's
it.
tiny. And the title was declared vacant. The broadcast was seen by 33 million people.
And we'll
Yes,
talk about
we're
this in
gonna-
another episode, and we'll just simply
Yeah,
say
we'll get into this way more
we're gonna
detailed.
review
evil twin
it, but-
referees. They said they've had
It's
Dave and
amazing.
Earl Hebner on the roster for a while, and they used it for the biggest angle of all time and the biggest audience. This was perfection.
We're going to talk about
Beautifully
this
done.
next.
So
We'll have an
WrestleMania
entire
3 draws
episode.
93,000 people and sells out this dome stadium.
Yeah.
And,
and
then
puts
this
WrestleMania-
broadcast catches
Puts
33
WrestleMania
million.
even more on the map than it ever was. It peaks Hulkamania. Now, almost a year later, February 5, 1988, they go to prime time, 8 p.m., NBC, 33 million people watch Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant's rematch. That's fucking amazing. Again,
Nobody
greatest
likes
feud of all
wrestling, though,
time,
bro.
Hulk
Nobody
Hogan
likes
versus
wrestling.
Andre the Giant. That's why we're doing this fucking episode. You have 2 of their matches. Their original match, they launched a separate pay-per-view, the big 2 of the big 4 Survivor Series, and then
Sure.
they're coming here. Like, it's amazing. 33 million people. It was like 15 million households, which translated to 13 million people, 33 million people
Yeah.
on a Friday night, which most television companies is like, that's death night. All people are out partying Friday nights and Saturday
Everyone's
nights.
on the
That's what you do.
clubs, bro. We're at the
Yeah,
club.
everyone's out there. 33 million people. Are you fucking a
Yep.
record that still stands to this day, by the way.
Yep. So at WrestleMania, Andre and
4.
Hogan fought to a
WrestleMania
double,
4, excuse me. I
Yeah,
forgot to-
WrestleMania 4. Andre and Hogan fought to a double disqualification in a WWF title tournament match. In the end, Hogan's friend, Macho Man Randy Savage, won the title, defeating DiBiase in the finals. The Hogan-Andre feud then simmered when Hogan took a leave of absence during the spring and early summer of 1980 to film the best movie in the world,
Shut up.
No Holds Barred. While Andre feuded with Duggan.
You know what? That I'm gonna just pause real quick here. I know it's not
What's
about
up?
this, but that segment when Duggan and Andre started to feud was actually fucking fire.
Andre and Hogan then fought in a steel cage match held at WrestleFest on July 31st, 1988 in Milwaukee, which Hogan won after knocking Andre from the cage.
That's a gem, by the way. It is on the network. You can find it. I think they released the Coliseum videos. It's called like Hogan Hulkamania or something like that, or Hulk Hogan Real American. That's the name of it.
Yeah.
If you go in there, it's on that, and it's part of the.
It causes
they have not
Andre to be
released
tied
that.
in the ropes, and that's how Hogan gets out, by the way.
What you go into? and the Hunter deep as he enters the cage. Keep his eye on Andre. He doesn't want Andre to jump him as he crosses the ropes here. And Andre does it. He doesn't make a move. I was surprised to see.
As I said before, we will have a winner in this one. And the only way there will be a winner is when one of the wrestlers goes over the top of the cage onto the floor or exits through the gate.
But the match actually is on the network.
$5
It's on Peacock. If you go and find, I think it's called Hulk Hogan Real American. It's one of the Coliseum home video releases. That match is on there. It's a fine match for what it is, and it's a weird cage match.
Is it the blue cage, the proper blue big steel?
Blue cage, yeah,
big blue, yeah.
Yep.
Interest in a possible resumption of the feud came in summer of 1988 when Savage began issuing open challenges for the WWF World Title, leading to a 2-on-1 attack by Andre and DiBiase. Savage recovered, and the next week declared he and Hogan would face Andre and DiBiase at the inaugural SummerSlam pay-per-view held at Madison
Hogan and Andre
Square Garden.
headlined WrestleMania. They launched the first Survivor Series.
Yep.
They launched the first ever main event primetime special. They launched the first ever SummerSlam.
Yeah, but other than that,
you're welcome.
Other than that, not impressed.
Other than launching 3 of the big 4 that still remain to this day, what else did they do?
Yeah, come on. It's not that big of a deal. At the main event match at SummerSlam, Andre and DiBiase, calling themselves the Megabucks, that was a cool name. I don't care what anybody says. Seemed to have a psychological advantage over Hogan and Savage, known as the Mega Powers, and the heel-aligned Jesse the Body Ventura was the special guest referee. However, the Mega Powers would prevail on, thus ending the Andre Hogan rivalry.
He's got him set up. Bombs away, perhaps.
Macho.
Oh, the packet line over.
Get up. And the man.
Let it drop.
Get down there and count, Ventura.
Jesse, right there. 1, 2. Oh, here's one. Count the 3.
To be on this, I cannot this fucking match.
Let's get the picture.
Next one.
Why?
Andre and Hogan. No, you can find the SummerSlam match. It's not on the next one. We're not talking about SummerSlam. We're talking about Andre and Hogan that one more time in their careers. Andre and Haku, who were teaming as the Colossal Connection, and the Colossal Connection were tag team champions, but this was a non-title match. People forget that Andre was a tag title champion.
It's a house show. So they were doing a house show loop where a bunch of times Hogan and Bossman were beating the Genius and Mr. Perfect over and over again. And then Andre and Haku were defending the titles against Demolition. This was right before Mania 6. And so it was a whole house show loop for like 2 months. And out of nowhere, I don't know if someone got injured or whatever, all of a sudden, Hogan and Bossman are facing Andre and Haku. And I can't find a picture. I can't find a fucking video like footage of it or anything. This match is not, it doesn't exist except for the reporting that this happened. And I went back and looked at a lot of wrestling sites. They actually report it in the house shows. There's one site called the Wrestling Encyclopedia, which they have every house show ever. And I went back and I found it and I was like, there's no pictures. There's nothing linked to it. And I was like, how the fuck can this match not exist? How in the fuck could they not put it on videotape? How could WWE not take a photo of it? One. Just to show that it happened. Yeah. I'm really bothered that I cannot see the last Hogan and Andre encounter. I'm really bothered by that.
It's like that. What was that? The one that was supposed to be Hogan's next big champion against Bret Hart that they couldn't find. They finally dug up the videotape somewhere in Bret's house.
Yeah,
you know, it's out there. It'll come eventually. This feud is still considered to be one of the biggest feud in WWF history. The impact and records are broken. They still stand to this day.
33 million viewers. Like their feud was just phenomenal. Like I can't express to people like how Hogan and Andre, like their place in history and about how what we're watching today is really a derivative of them. Like, don't get me wrong, Hogan started the Rocket. He was a megastar by the time he fought Andre at WrestleMania 3. But Andre letting him go over and Andre turning heel and just the way their careers, Andre's was ending, Hogan's was like, peaking. If it didn't happen, I don't know. Yeah, WrestleMania would still have been the same thing, I think. I think that
Sure.
I'm not going to say that, WrestleMania wouldn't have been a big deal after that. Hogan was still the most popular guy in the world. But if they just let Andre retire and never did it, I don't know if Hogan never has that big victory that capped off, again, WrestleMania 17 was a love letter to the Attitude
Era.
Era.
You put 92,000 people in without Andre. I really don't.
Yeah. Well,
maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe it was 70 or something that they recorded, 60 paid, 70 in attendance or whatever. But I think that, if WrestleMania 17 was a love letter to the Attitude Era, I think that Hogan and Andre was the cherry on the sundae of Hulkamania in 87. And that rise that started in 84. Yeah, in rock and wrestling that started. And then after that, they just started transforming into something different.
It took a long time to match WrestleMania 3. 4 didn't do it, trying to put it on Savage. 5 didn't do it after
Dallas, right?
After a whole year-long feud between Hogan and Savage. 6, they began to
they were in
a bit epic, and they found a little Stardust again. But it took a while to match 3 and to match that epicness and to match this.
Honestly, it was I'd say it was 17.
Yeah.
They always say that wrestling's the best when you can't guess. You couldn't guess who was going to win versus Austin and Rock at WrestleMania 17. That's what made it so good. Because you really, at that point, at that time in their careers, you had no idea that Austin was going to turn heel in that match. Nobody knew. But it's like you had to watch them. I don't know who's going to win. The Rock could win. It would make 100% sense. Austin could win. It would make 100% sense. But then watching this, good and evil, you're like, Hogan's the man, but I don't know if he could beat Andre because WWF did such a good job at protecting Andre, saying he'd never been beaten, even though he had been, by DQ and stuff like that. Saying he'd never been slammed, which he had been, not 4 years earlier, 5 years earlier. It's just it's amazing what they did back here, and they made you believe, and you stood in awe every time you watched Hogan and Andre face off against each other, whether it was the outdoor Milwaukee Stadium, whether it was WrestleMania 4, 3, Survivor Series, SummerSlam. Every time they got in there with each other, the crowd stood up and because it was Hogan and Andre. And it was just, there's never going to be a bigger feud, in my opinion, on a main event level that meant so much to a company than Hogan versus Andre. To this day, I don't think there has been. I don't know if it can be beaten with the respect that Andre commanded.
You can't tell stories like that anymore, man.
And right at the right time, right when Hulkamania was peaking, they put Andre right there. And it was the perfect time for Andre to be. I think if he did a year earlier, it might have been premature. But in 87, when they pulled the trigger finally, it was this is right. Hogan beat everybody else. He beat the Pipers, the Orndorffs, the Studs, the Gangs, the Kamalas, the Bundys,
on the national levels,
the Heenan family. There was nobody else for Hogan. And then it's oh, what? Andre's turning heel? He's challenging him? What? I don't know if you can ever duplicate this. I really don't.
The only thing that I can close my eyes and you could even maybe touch, and it probably wouldn't even work, something like Brock and Rock or Roman and Rock is the only 2 combinations that I could ever see even attempting to build something to get close to what this was. Other than that, there's nothing. There's just, everything's too fractured and there's no mainstream anymore. It'll never be like this again, ever.
No, I won't. For audio fans, give us a listen on Apple, Spotify, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, and Google Podcast, or watch our videos on YouTube at Our Wrestling Channel. Can you do us a solid on social media and give us a follow on Instagram or Twitter at O.W.P 2019 or on Facebook/Meta at Our Wrestling Podcast. This is Dave, Jess, and Craig with the O.W.P signing off. Have a good one.
Whatever.
Hola.